We're now live.
Okay.
Okay, now, Mary.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I can start, no?
Yeah.
A nuestros amigos en Mexico, buenas tardes. Sa ating mga kababayan sa Pilipinas, magandang umaga. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the inauguration of La Historia Olvidada, Filipinas-México 2023. Before we start, we would like to remind our attendees of the following guidelines. Your video cameras and microphones on Zoom should be disabled throughout the program and the presentation.
You went on mute, Crystal. Okay.
Again, now before we start, we would like to remind our attendees of the following guidelines. Video cameras and microphones of attendees on Zoom should be disabled throughout the program and the presentation. If you wish to raise a question or comment, you may do so during the open forum. The event, Historia Olvidada, Filipinas-México 2023, a virtual colloquium series on the historical, cultural, and diplomatic ties between the Philippines and Mexico. The event, organized by the Philippine Embassy in Mexico, in partnership with the Department of History of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, El Colegio de San Luis, and the Philippine-Mexico Studies Program, is also streaming live on the YouTube channel of the Philippine Embassy. I am Cristel Obispado from the University of the Philippines Department of History, and I will be your moderator for this afternoon. We would like to acknowledge the presence of our distinguished guests who are in attendance in the Zoom meeting. Honorary Consul Mario de la O, Ma'am Joselita Guin de Zumalbag from Department of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Roberto Junco of INA, Sir Alfonso Espinosa Estrada of Tourism, Sir Edwin Bolastig of World Health Organization, Dean April Relacion of Misamis University, to our colleagues, priests, historians, and especially teachers and students from different universities in the Philippines, from Cordillera region to Mindanao and abroad. Thank you for your participation. To give the opening remarks, we wish to call on Dr. Tomas Calvillo of El Colegio de San Luis.
Thank you, Cristal Obispado. I enjoy really this day. Quiero agradecer a los coordinadores académicos del evento, a Marisa Winkler, de la Embajada de Filipinas en México, a ti, Cristal Obispado, de la Universidad de Filipinas, al doctor Iván Valdés, del programa de Filipinas-México Estudios de la UNAM, y también quisiera saludar a quien va a abrir con una conferencia este evento, que es una invitada de lujo, a la doctora Claudia Paulina Machuca Chávez, que creo que es una investigadora que lleva muchos años dedicada a la relación histórica entre México y Filipinas. Me da un enorme gusto que sea ella quien inicie este seminario. Quisiera también muy brevemente pensar que este evento se va a convertir y se puede convertir en un seminario permanente de la historia de la relación México-Filipinas, que sabemos no es únicamente México-Filipinas, es Asia-Pacífico, América y España, Europa. Me parece que la participación de los primeros conferencistas de este cierre de año y los que vendrán después apuntan a profundizar una relación global muy significativa para nuestros países, para México y Filipinas. La presencia de la doctora Claudia Paulina Machuca, como también del doctor Cuauhtémoc Villamar, que el 21 de noviembre presentará, y de la maestra Maricruz Pisa, nos anuncia abrir una nueva perspectiva a los estudios de la relación histórica entre México y Filipinas. Esperemos, y así lo veo yo, esperemos que esta sea la mejor manera de celebrar los 70 años de la relación entre ambos países. Los 70 años es tener una edad venerable. Veneramos de esta manera la historia de nuestras poblaciones. Muchas gracias por todo tu trabajo, Cristi, por todo tu esfuerzo, y creo que va a dar frutos muy pronto. Aquí estamos presentes.
Muchísimas gracias, Dr. Calvillo. It is both an honor and a privilege to have the Philippine Ambassador to Mexico, Her Excellency Lilibet de Apera, deliver her welcome remarks.
Good evening, good morning to all our participants present in this event, including those who are joining us via our YouTube channel. On behalf of the Embassy of the Philippines in Mexico, allow me to express my sincerest gratitude to our distinguished guest speaker for the inauguration of La Historia Olvidada, Filipinas-México 2023. Doctora Paulina Machuca of El Colegio de Michoacán. I would also like to extend my appreciation to Dr. Tomas Calvillo of El Colegio de San Luis and Dr. Neil Marshall Santillan of the University of the Philippines, who played instrumental roles in bringing this event to fruition. Likewise, my appreciation also to the academic coordinators of this virtual colloquium series, namely Third Secretary and Vice Consul Marisa Winkler of the Philippine Embassy in Mexico, Dr. Cristel Obispado of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and Dr. Ivan Valdez Buvnov of the Philippine-Mexico Studies Program of Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. In 2011, during my tenure as Consul of the Philippine Embassy in Mexico, our office facilitated a collaborative effort between various institutions in the Philippines and Mexico. This initiative brought together the University of the Philippines, El Colegio de San Luis, El Colegio de Mexico, and the Archivo General de la Nación in Mexico, with a shared objective of disseminating knowledge and preserving our rich cultural and historical heritage. The outcome of this venture was a highly fruitful collaboration, including the exchange of Filipino instructors who conducted research in Mexico. Today, it brings me great joy to present Historia Olvidada on behalf of the Philippine Embassy in Mexico, in collaboration with the University of the Philippines, Diliman, El Colegio de San Luis, and the Philippine-Mexico Studies Program based at the University Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. This initiative is a continuation of the efforts we initiated over a decade ago. Historia Olvidada is a permanent virtual colloquium series that we are dedicated to sustaining for years to come. So that wish, Ambassador Calvillo, I hope really that it will come into fruition. For 2023, we have already scheduled 3 distinguished speakers. Dr. Paulina Machuca graces us as our inaugural speaker. In November, we will be honored to host Dr. Cuauhtemoc Villamar, a prominent researcher and former diplomat who will delve into the Philippines-Mexico connection during the Baroque era, including the production of Roman Catholic art by Asian artists. Finally, for our December session, we look forward to a presentation by Ms. Maricruz Pisa Lopez, who will enlighten us about Southeast Asian cuisine on the Costa Grande of Guerrero. So you will see that this is a very varied colloquium, no? It will not only focus on the political, on the economic, but it really help to enrich our knowledge of the Philippines-Mexico relations. The embassy has been actively promoting diplomatic, cultural, and academic ties between the Philippines and Mexico. Our shared history and culture are intertwined more closely than we may realize. I hope that this initiative will serve as a valuable tool in increasing awareness of our enduring relationship spanning from the 16th century to the contemporary period. Allow me to conclude with the renowned words of the Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges. Somos nuestra memoria, somos ese quimérico museo de formas inconstantes, ese montón de espejos rotos. We are our memory. We are that chimerical museum of ever-changing forms, that heap of shattered mirrors. Thank you very much. Mabuhay. Maraming salamat po. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you so much, Ambassador de Pera. To give us a short message, let's all welcome Dr. Neil Marshall Santillan of the History Department, University of the Philippines, Diliman.
Good morning to all from the Philippines. On behalf of the University of the Philippines Department of History, it is an honor and a privilege that we have been invited to collaborate in organizing the virtual colloquium series on the historical, cultural, and diplomatic ties between the Philippines and Mexico, titled La Historia Olvidada, Filipinas-México 2023. I am so honored to join this event with esteemed colleagues from Mexico. The relevance of this collaboration is incredibly meaningful for the department for a number of reasons. First, it serves to sustain our partnership with El Colegio de San Luis Potosí during the Philippine-Spanish Friendship Day Conference organized by our department held in October 2022. We had the signing of a memorandum of understanding between our university and Colsan. The said conference also held the Philippine launch of the book titled In Torno al Galeon, Manila Acapulco, edited and co-authored by Tomas Javier Calvillo Una, the prime mover of the said memorandum, who is deeply connected with the Philippines as a former diplomat based in Manila and a scholar who continues to advance Philippine-Mexican studies. Furthermore, this collaboration opens another possibility of forging ties with Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México through its Philippine-Mexico Studies program headed by Dr. Ivan Valdez-Bavno. An MOU between UNAM and our university has been recommended by my colleague, Dr. Cristel Obispado, our leading expert on Philippine-Mexico studies. Rest assured that our university, through the department, will formalize our partnership with UNAM through an MOU. As shared by Dr. Obispado, possible funding may be sourced from the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs through the able leadership of Philippine Ambassador to Mexico, Lilibet de Pera, to facilitate exchange of students and academics between the two universities. This collaboration with Colsan and eventually with UNAM reiterates that we're committed to actively working with other leading academic institutions outside the Philippines in shedding light on previously unknown or understudied aspects of Philippine-Mexico relations. We are equally committed to working with the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs to advance these relations far and wide in the years to come. Lastly, my final takeaway from this collaboration is the renewed spirit to uncover more about our shared and storied past with Mexico and how this played a central role in connecting people, cultures, and ideas across the Pacific for centuries. Kudos and utmost gratitude to the colloquium's esteemed speakers led by Dr. Paulina Machuca and to the academic coordinators of this colloquium, Vice Consul Marisa Winkler of the Philippine Embassy in Mexico, Dr. Calvillo of Colsan, Dr. Valdez-Bavno of UNAM, and my colleague, Dr. Obispado, who is so vital in leading Philippine-Mexico studies in our university. Thank you for listening and looking forward to our conversation. Again, good morning to all from the Philippines.
Maraming salamat po, Dr. Neil Santillan. At this point, we shall proceed to our inaugural lecture. To introduce the speaker, she's currently a professor at El Colegio de Michoacan. Her recent works have centered on the rich history of cultural exchanges between Mexico and the Philippines from the 16th to the 18th centuries. She has conducted extensive ethnographic fieldwork across various regions of the Philippines, including Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Among her notable publications are El vino de coco en la Nueva España, Historia de una transculturación en el siglo XVII, and Historia mínima de Filipinas. which was a finalist for the 2021 ICAS Awards in Spanish. In 2016, she co-edited the book México y Filipinas, Culturas y Memorias sobre el Pacífico with Dr. Tomás Calvo. In 2013, she directed the documentary Acerto by México y Filipinas, 4 siglos de historia compartida. Recognizing her outstanding contributions, she was awarded the Scholarship for Women in the Humanities in 2011 by the Presidencia de la República and CONACYT. Additionally, in 2019, she received the prestigious Francisco Javier Clavijero Prize from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History for her exceptional research on El Vino de Cocos in La Nueva España. Let's all give a round of applause to Doctora Paulina Machuca.
But thank you very much. Good afternoon in Mexico. Good morning in the Philippines. And first of all, I would like to thank the Philippine Embassy in Mexico for the kind invitation they extended to me to give this conference on the historical relationships between Mexico and the Philippines. I would like to especially thank Ambassador Lilibet de Apera, Christy Lobispado, Tomás Calvillo, Marisa Winkler, and Ivan Valdez for organizing this series of talks. More than 11 years ago, I went to the Philippines for the first time, and I remember that Tomás Calvillo was the ambassador there, the Mexican ambassador in the Philippines. And since then, I have not stopped visiting that beautiful country and have continued my research on cultural exchanges between Mexico and the Philippines. This afternoon, I prepared a presentation intended for a general and non-specialized audience to convey some elements that I think that are very important to point out about the ties that unite Mexico and the Philippines. I have lots of slides, so let's get started. But before, I would like to ask you to be patient if I forget some words in English or if I mix English, French, and Spanish. So let's start. Can you see it, Crystal? Okay,
Yes.
great. So the first question that we have to make is, why was there a close relationship between Mexico and the Philippines despite the distance? Because there are 13 kilometers distance between Mexico and the Philippines. So this is a question that not many people know the answer. And it's because the Manila Galleon or the Acapulco Galleon traveled every year across the immense Pacific Ocean. And on the slide, you can see more or less the route from Acapulco to Cavite, and then from Cavite to Acapulco. So we have a historic relationship thanks to the Manila Galleon, whose Trans-Pacific route was maintained between 1565 and 1815. So the Manila Galleon was known under different names. In the documentation, we can find Galeón de las Filipinas, Nao de las Filipinas, Nao de la China, or Nao de Acapulco. So it depended, because in the Philippines, they say the Nao de Acapulco, but in Acapulco, they say the Nao de las Filipinas, or sometimes Nao de la China. So when did the Manila Galleon route begin? You have this commemorative monument in Barra de Navidad, Jalisco, 1564, 1964. And you have the twin monument in Manila, in Plaza Mexico. There is a twin monument because they commemorated the expedition of Miguel López de Legazpi. Miguel López de Legazpi left Barra de Navidad in Jalisco, Mexico, November 1564. Then he arrived to the Philippines. And then Andrés de Urdaneta, the next year, 1565, he came back to Acapulco. So he inaugurated the Tornaviaje or Tornavuelta. So by that, we can say that the Manila Galleon more or less officially started the route. Also in Manila, we can see this beautiful monument. And for me, this is very, very representative. If you read here, they say that the Manila Acapulco Galleon symbolizes the close cultural links between the Philippines and Mexico. And that is true. That is true, and I discovered that in my voyages to the Philippines. So before, we have to answer the question, how did the Filipinos arrive in New Spain? When we speak about the New Spain or Nueva España, we are referring to Mexico, but in colonial times, okay? So sometimes I'm going to say New Spain, sometimes I'm going to say Mexico. So how did the Filipinos arrive here? Why do we in Mexico have a lot of influence from the Philippines? So it is estimated that between 5,000 and 20,000 Asians settled in New Spain, Mexico. They were known as Indios Chinos, or Chinese Indians, if I translate, to be differentiated from the native Indians. So all the people from Asia that arrived in the New Spain, in Mexico, they were called Indios Chinos. Of course, many of them were from the Philippines, but not only. If you see this map, we have recorded the origins of all these Asian people. So many people came from the Philippines, of course, especially from Luzon, and sometimes we can trace from Visayas, but some people came from the Moluccas, from what is now Indonesia, and even from the India de Portugal. The India de Portugal is this region, India, that belonged to the Portuguese Empire. So some of these people were sold as slaves, and the Portuguese took them by the Malacca Strait, and they took them to the Philippines. And from the Philippines, they traveled to Mexico or New Spain on the Galleon. So we can say that many of these Asian people, yes, came from the Philippines, but from other parts of Southeast Asia. So once in Mexico, these people, these Indios Chinos, settled especially on the Pacific coast here. This is the Mexican Pacific coast. Here we have Colima region, and here we have Acapulco. So they were established there, and they worked especially on the coconut plantations and the cocoa plantations too, and some tropical plants. But some of them went to Mexico City, the capital, and its surroundings, because they were also from the domestic service. Some of them were commerciants. And we can trace that some of these Asian people or Indios Chinos established in the mining zones. There was a period, a short period, where they were hired here in the production of silver. But I have worked especially with the Indios Chinos or the Filipinos that established here in the Colima region on the Pacific and in the Acapulco and its surrounding area. So the surrounding area is called Costa Grande. Costa Grande de Guerrero. Guerrero is the name of the actual state. So they were established here. This is important because what you are going to see in the next slides is focused on this zone. So what impact did the galleon have in Mexico? We can trace the Philippine influence in many aspects of everyday life, but I'm going to talk to you about the introduction of the coconut, the influence in gastronomy, the influence on textile techniques, the influence on religious devotions, and the influence on everyday life elements. So let's start by coconut culture in Mexico. Well, coconut is considered as the tree of life because of many of its benefits to human beings. We have a lot of things from coconut. We have beverage, we have food, we have houses from coconut, we have many elements in the everyday life. Even in medicine, coconut is important in local medicine. This is a picture of the coast of Colima, where I was born. So I know very, very well the region. And we can see the dissemination of the coconut in Mexico or New Spain. So it is true that coconut arrived in Mexico by the Portuguese commercial routes. But the most important for the Mexican Pacific coast was the introduction from Las Islas Salomón, the Solomon Islands first in 1569, but after that from the Philippines. From the Philippines, where the Spaniards established. So from 1571 and on, we can trace documents where they mention that they have coconuts on the galleon. So this is the dissemination route that we can see. And once the coconut arrived in the Mexican Pacific coast, we can see an ecological phenomenon, very important, and is the displacement of the coconut to other native palms in Mexico. So coconut displaced native palms. So this is a picture of the Colima coast, and you can see the coconut palms here and the native palms, which are very few. So this palm is called Cayaco, has almost disappeared. And this is a phenomenon because the native people began to use more the coconut because they found that it was easier to cultivate. The leaves lasted more on the roofs of the houses, and they got more benefits from the coconut than from native palm. But this is an ecological phenomenon that we can see not only in the Colima region, but also in Acapulco. Coconut served as a mother tree for cocoa plantations. This is a picture I like to show. It was taken in Bohol. I took this picture in Bohol. And you can see a cocoa tree and the coconut palm tree. So cocoa tree needs a mother tree to protect it from the sun. Because if cocoa plantations don't have a mother tree, they're going to perish. So they need a higher tree. So the coconut is really well for that. So we have two elements, Asian elements, which is the coconut, and the cocoa, which is American element. So this is something that we see from the 17th century on, not only in Mexico, but also in the Philippines. So when the coconut arrived in Mexico, we see it from Colima to Acapulco in some places called haciendas de palma de beneficio. And in those haciendas, we see those elements, ecological elements that go together very well. And we have historical maps of Colima that show the coconut palm estates. Estates is hacienda in Spanish. So if you hear the word hacienda, is kind of states. So there is the eruption of many coconuts there. More historical maps that show the plantations or the haciendas. And one important question: what were the products derived from the coconut palms? Because you are listening to me that the coconut arrived and here and that, but what was the importance of the coconut? So the importance is that in those estates, in those haciendas, the Spaniards hired the Filipinos to make lambanog. Lambanog is called vino de cocos. Vino de cocos that was produced in Colima at the end of the 16th century, but most on the 17th century. So for you to understand the importance of lambanog, because you can say, well, lambanog is important for the Philippines, but why for Mexico? Because lambanog was the first distilled beverage that was produced and commercialized in New Spain. In Mesoamerica or in ancient America, we didn't have still beverages or distilled beverages. The alcoholic beverages were fermented, but not distilled. So we have the first beverage that comes from 50 degrees volume alcohol. So that makes the difference. And here we have the map of the production of Lambanog in Colima, in the zone of Colima. And this is a map of the Lambanog or Vino de Cocos production in the zone near Acapulco, in the region called Costa Grande. So the Filipinos work there. The Spaniards were the owners of the states, and the Filipinos worked there in the Lambanog production. So the Vino de Cocos, or the Lambanog, was really, really successful. And here you have a map of the New Spain or Mexico where it was sold. You know, the zone of commercialization was that, from Colima to there. Ciudad de Mexico, here we have Guadalajara, which was important. The mining zones, because this beverage, the Lambanog, was sold in mining zones. So in the capitals, but also in mining zones. So it was really a success in New Spain. And after the production of Vino de Cocos or Lambanog, we have the emergence of mezcal, the first mezcal. Maybe you know tequila. Well, tequila and mezcal, they come from the agave, you know, the maguey or agave plant. But the maguey or agave plant and the mezcal and the tequila, they originated thanks to the Lambanog, thanks to the Vino de Coco production, because the technique, the Philippine technique of the stills was used first for Lambanog, but after that for the mezcal making. So for us in Mexico, tequila is our emblematic beverage. Mezcal also, because nowadays mezcal is really important too. And the origin of those beverages comes from a Philippine technique. So this is very important. Nowadays we have Mexican Asian stills for mezcal production in many parts, and the stills have been adapted depending of the local zone and the materials in the areas they are produced. So Lambanog making in Mexico, yes. This is a picture from a dear friend from the Philippines in Infanta. I've been to Infanta, but I didn't see this still. So this is the Philippine still, and this is like the Philippine still adapted in Mexico. This is a town in Jalisco where they produce mezcal, but with the Philippine still. This is called the Philippine still. You can see it's really rustic, but in the archives we have found the descriptions since the 17th century of this still for Lambanog making and then for mezcal making. So we have the Lambanog to mezcal. This is a book that Crystal mentioned in her presentation. This is a book I wrote in 2018 called El Vino de Cocos en la Nueva España, and it's a book about the history of Lambanog making in Mexico in the 17th century. And although Lambanog, or coconut wine, disappeared in the 18th century in Mexico, surprise, it has recently started to be produced again in Colima. This is really, really recently, and I don't know if Ambassador Lilibet or Tomas Calvillo or other people in the audience know that they are producing again Vino de Cocos in Colima. Well, I have here this bottle, you know. Well, other derived product of the coconut is the tuba. In 2012, in 2012, 2013, and 2015, I made research in Luzon and Visayas for tuba making. For tuba making, especially in the island of Bohol. And what I did was to compare how did they make tuba in the Philippines and in Mexico. So I took many pictures just to show the difference. You know, in Colima, they are called tubero. I know that in the Philippines, tubero is other thing. And in Bohol, they are called manananggot or mananguete. So the way the tuberos or mananguete climb to the palm trees is really the same, really the same. They make some cuttings on the palm trees so they can climb. Also, the cuttings they make for the tuba production is almost the same, you know. You have to be very accurate for the cutting, because if you're not accurate, then the liquid or the sap will not come out. So you have to be very careful. So even if the tuba production is really similar, it is in the way of consuming the tuba, which is different. Because this is a picture from Colima where they sell tuba. This is a tubero in Colima, and here's another tubero. So tuba in Colima is not an alcoholic beverage. It is a refreshing beverage. It's a refreshing, and you can put some mani or some other fruits as topping. In the Philippines, tuba is an alcoholic beverage, something like a beer. It can go to 7, 8, 9% of alcoholic volume in the Philippines, but not in Mexico. So this is different. And if you see that the tuba is kind of red, is because in the Philippines, they put some powder from a mangrove. It is called tonog from the tangal tree. So that is the difference of consuming tuba in both places. But as you saw, the way they got it is almost the same, almost the same. But in Colima, tuba has become an identity element. I am from Colima, and we can say that tubero is everywhere. For us, tubero is a very powerful figure that is in our minds. It's part of our identity there. You can see them as part of manufacturing, artisanal manufacturing. And if you are interested in knowing more about tuba making in Mexico and the Philippines, you can go on YouTube channel, and there is a documentary. And also the documentary has English subtitles, so you can understand better, because I know that not many of you speak Spanish. So this is an invitation. And I'm going to talk about the coconut in everyday life. Of course, we have the palapa. Palapa is a word that comes from the Southeast Asia region, also from the Philippines. For us, palapa is like the roof made from the leaves of the coconut palm tree. So, and not many people in Mexico know that palapa is not a Mexican word. It's a word that comes from Asia, but it is very common for us. If you go to the coast, you go to a restaurant, and sometimes the architectural place is called palapa. There is a palapa, you know, it is very common. So this is kind of the influence that we had. We had the chocolate coconut. Chocolate coconut is because they used to in the New Spain, the rich families, because they were expensive, the rich families used to drink hot chocolate on coconut cups. And coconut cups, because they said that it was medicinal to drink them there because of the coconut properties, etc. So we can find really beautiful cups that you know, the coconut nut was decorated with silver or with gold. Ananga raincoats were introduced in Mexico too. I took this picture in the Ilocos region, and the explanation is that the ananga, it was like the raincoat before the plastic raincoat. Well, in Colima, we also, not only Colima, in Mexico, we also had those raincoats. Those raincoats, but they were called China, you know, China, like the Chinese. Because, you know, when in the newspaper they called China or Chinese, they were referring not really to China nowadays, but Asian. China as a synonym of Asia, you know. So we had the Chinas, but in Colima, I know people that call these raincoats manga, like a derivation from ananga. So this is a Philippine influence too that we had. And of course, there are a lot of examples on Philippine influence on gastronomy, but I'm just going to mention a few because I don't have a lot of time. So in the coconut recipe books since colonial times, we have a lot of recipes like the bocadillos de coco, for example, the ways of making cocada. You know, in Colima, the cocadas are the typical sweeteners. We had the ante de coco y piña. You know, here is a melange, a mixture of Asian plants and American plants. And not in many places in Mexico, but in Colima, in the market, we can find tuba vinegar. You know, it is not very common to find that, because I know in the Philippines, the tuba vinegar is the most popular. Not in Mexico, but in Colima, we can find vinagre de tuba or tuba vinegar, which is a really Philippine influence we have there. Recently, Maricruz Pisa, which is going to speak in December, she was my ancient or my former student. We published this article called El Guinatán, un platillo de origen filipino en la Costa Grande de Guerrero. Guinatán comes from Guinatán, of course, you know. And when we were doing this work, we found out that not many people in Guerrero knew that Guinatán was a Philippine word, you know. They didn't know that Guinatán comes from the coconut milk, and they were very proud of the dish because it's a typical dish, it's a local dish. So it was interesting to do this work because, as I mentioned, not many people recognize the Philippine influence in many aspects. That's why Tomás Calvillo insists that this is a forgotten history, you know, una historia olvidada, that we have to volver a recordar, you know, to reintroduce like those memories, because many people have forgotten. So the Guinatán is an example of that. We have, of course, other tropical plants that came via the galleon, like the mango or the sampalok, the tamarind. Even our great Diego Rivera, you know, our muralist Diego Rivera, which is really known abroad, he painted this mural in Cuernavaca, in el Palacio de Cortés, and he has mangoes among the indigenous people. And it is important for me because for Diego Rivera, the mangoes were like typical or local or indigenous to Mexico. And the mangoes came from the Philippines. You know, I've been to this little island near Aklan, Guimaras, where they have these delicious mangoes there. And the mango is really common here in Mexico. So it's been part of our culture. No. And we have the influence of the kinilaw, but we have the ceviche. So I think that ceviche has really an influence of kinilaw from the Philippines. it's been a discussion. Sometimes when we are talking about gastronomy or the history of food, we don't have a lot of information, but we didn't have ceviche before. It was after the galleon that mentions to ceviche are made. So I am pretty sure that there is a Philippine influence in the ceviche that we have. And we have these delicacies called coyotas from Sonora, Mexico. For those who do not know the geography of Mexico, Sonora is bordered to the United States on the northern part. So they have these coyotas, which are really delicious. But when I went to Cebu, I tasted the piaya, you know. I know that piaya is also typical from the Negros island. So when I tasted them, I said to myself, this is like the coyota from Mexico. It was really similar when you see it, when you taste it. So I'm not pretty sure when this influence, if there is an influence, arrived. But you know, there are these kind of things that invite us to search more, to know who influenced who, you know. We have influence in textile techniques. You know, in Mexico, we have this rebozo de bolitas, which is very typical for women. The rebozo de bolita, bolita in English would be like spot, like this, little spot. And for making the rebozo de bolita, in Mexico, we have been using the ikat technique. The ikat technique, of course, comes from the Philippines. Even the word ikat, you know, you can find it there in Mindanao and in some other parts of Asia. So the ikat technique consists in making little dots by not dyeing them, you know. First, you have this kind of stuff that you make, and then you dye the textile, and then you have this result. This is the rebozo de bolita. This is very, very common in Mexico. It's a shawl. Rebozo means like shawl. And who might have known that the ikat was there in the heart of the rebozo or the shawl making. So this is really amazing. But we also have religious devotions, like my dear Santo Niño de Cebu. I really love the Santo Niño de Cebu. And the Santo Niño de Cebu devotion arrived in Mexico at the end of the 17th century. It arrived in this region near Acapulco, but this is the Costa Chica. Acapulco is more or less here. It arrived here with some Filipinos. This is an article that my husband and I wrote some years ago. If you are interested, I can share it with you. But you know, with the time, the Santo Niño de Cebu was turned to Santo Niño Manuelito. And there is like the second part of this article, but the second part is written by an anthropologist, a friend of us. And this anthropologist analyzes the transition into the Santo Niño de Cebu into the Santo Niño Manuelito in Guerrero right now. But you know, in the documents that we found in this text, it was really surprising that the Filipino who was involved there, and then the natives there, and they told that the Santo Niño came out from a bamboo, you know, like the legend. This is a typical legend in the Philippines. Human beings coming out from bamboo, for example. So this legend, we find it in Mexico at the end of the 18th century. We have many elements in the everyday life. For example, the cockfighting. Oh, in Mexico, it's really, really popular, the cockfighting. So there is an influence on the Mexican Pacific coast of that. This is an illustration by the Gervasio Gironella album, you know, the cockfighting. These are some pictures I took in, I think it was Bohol, or Aklan, I don't remember. But I know that the cogs are very important in the Philippines, but in some parts of Mexico too. I will not talk about this because I don't have much time, but this is one of my most recent publications, which is called Global Microhistory of the Baybayin in Colima. We have found signatures in Baybayin in the Colima archives. So this is an analysis of those signatures, and I kind of try to search for these people who signed the documents in Baybayin. This publication, this article is available on internet. You can find it easily by the name if you are interested. But what I discuss here, I'm just going to say briefly, what I discuss here is that there are a few parts in the world, including the Philippines, that we can find signatures in Baybayin. And Colima was one of those. So it's also really, really interesting. So the other part is the Mexican influence in the Philippines. I've seen going to the markets in many islands there that you have many plants from American origin. You have the cocoa, the piña, the camote, the papaya, the achuete, you call the achuete, the camatis, the sayote, or the aguacate, the avocado. So many plants that come from Mexico or the American continent are very common nowadays in the Philippines. And this is a picture I really love, which I took in Cebu, really near the Santo Niño Cathedral. And these are elote, we call in Mexico elote. And this person is selling esquite. Esquite, well, this is the corn cooked. And in Mexico, we put salt and some chili. And you know, when I saw there, I said, oh my God, I'm liking Mexico. I feel really like in Mexico. It was really, really touching. And you have metates in the Philippines. Metate is a Nahua word. The metate is a really Mesoamerican element, which was used to grind the corn. And in the Philippines, I found metates for grinding cocoa, not corn, but for grinding cocoa. And you call metate. You conserve the Nahua word. You also have the camote. And you know, I think that you use more the camote in dishes than us in Mexico. So it's really surprising. And what about the siling? The siling labuyo. This is in Bohol, I think. Well, many pictures. This is Mindanao. This is Bohol. This is the native suka. I think it was in Ilocos. This I took it in Manila. But you use the sili, the chile in Mexico, the sili, in many ways, many ways. And as reading an article about the siling labuyo, it was like, it is considered as Filipino, you know, like a second domestication of the chile or the siling. So it's really interesting there. And in the Philippine vocabulary, you have a lot of words from Nahua origin. This is an article wrote by Miguel León Portilla some years ago, in which he discusses the Nahua words in the Philippine vocabulary. So you can see here that these words that you have of Nahua origin are almost all of them vegetables or fruits, you know. And Our Lady of Guadalupe, of course, there is a Mexican influence in the Philippines with the Lady of Guadalupe. The Barong Tagalog made from piña. You know that piña came from Spain to the Philippines. And you know, in Mexico, we don't make clothes from the pineapple. Even in the Amazonian region where the pineapple is originated, they don't make clothes. The only country I have seen with these beautiful garments is the Philippines. So you took a plant that came from Mexico and then you transform it into garments, into clothes. So there are pictures I took in Aklan where they produce piña for clothes production. So I'm going to finish here because I would like you to participate. But some final words is that in Mexico, Asian culture, and more specifically Filipino culture, is our fourth root. Why the fourth root? Because we have the Indian, European, and African root. So the Philippine is our fourth root. And this is a question for you. What about the Philippines? The Mexican root is part of your root? I think that the answer is yes, but I would like to listen to you. And from Colima, la ciudad de Las Palmeras, maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paulina Machuca, for that enlightening discussion. The Filipinos in Mexico, they have a shared experience, no? That whenever they are asked where they come from and they say, oh, we are Filipinos, they actually get the same response. Oh, Manny Pacquiao, no? But fortunately, following a very engaging presentation by Dr. Machuca, it becomes evident that our interconnected history extends far beyond boxing, no? It manifests itself, as we've heard from Dr. Machuca, in the flora and fauna that envelop our environment, the beverages and culinary delights that grace our tables, the clothes, no, we wear, and even the words that we speak bear the trace of our collective past, serving as a testament to the far-reaching impact of our intertwined history. Before we proceed to question and answer, I know you're excited to participate in the discussion. We would like to acknowledge the presence of Honorary Consul General Limuel Dadulo of Dominican Republic, Dr. Ivan Valdez-Bobnob of Philippine-Mexico Studies Program of Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, UNAM, and Dr. Chick Fadriquela of International Council on Monuments and Sites, or ICOMOS, Philippines. We now open the virtual floor to your questions. If you have a question or comment, you can use Zoom's question and answer or chat function or Zoom's raise hand function. We kindly request you to state your name and affiliation. Okay, let's start with David Jonathan. Please unmute, David.
Good morning, buenos dias. So my question, Sean talked about the influences of Mexico to the Philippines and the Philippines to Mexico, and it even discussed the presence of Filipinos themselves within Mexico through the populations and by buy-in signatures. But I wanted to know, was there any Native Americans who managed to get to the Philippines?
This is an excellent question, and this is under discussion. And sometimes I disagree with some of my colleagues because, Jonathan, on the contrary side, because Filipinos in Mexico arrived by thousands, between 5,000 and 20,000. We don't know exactly how much, because many of them they didn't have any records, or they didn't leave any records. So that is the difference, you know, on the quantity. But on the other side, we know that some Indians, Mexican Indians, arrived in the Philippines by the end of the 16th century and maybe the 17th century, but we can count them by maybe 10 people, but not more, you know? And many people ask me, okay, so if we have a Mexican influence in the Philippines, like the metate or the cultivation of plants, so why do we have this influence if the Mexican Indian didn't come to the Philippines? So my answer is, until now, what we know is that, you know, the religious people, the priests, you know, people from the church, they were like the, well, we have many concepts, passeurs in French, intermediates, you know, maybe in English, because many of these religious people first were working on local towns. So they learned many things from the Indians, from the Mexican Indians. And then when they were translated to the Philippines, they transmitted this knowledge to the people in the Philippines. So I think that the clergy, that the people, that the religious people of different orders, Franciscan, Dominicans, Augustinians, Jesuits, etc. So they were very important to transport the Mexican knowledge, the Mesoamerican knowledge to the Philippines. So did Mexican Indians arrive in the Philippines? Yes, but not as much as the cultural influence that we perceive in the Philippines. So not only the people from the church, but only the soldiers, because there are many soldiers that were born in New Spain. They were not born in Spain. They were born in New Spain. Maybe they were mestizos from an Indian mother and a Spaniard father. And they had these two elements. You know, people that were born in New Spain were between two worlds, the European world and the indigenous world. So when they went to the Philippines, of course, maybe they had this baggage with them. So they transmitted many of the cultural elements that we know now. Why not people from the administration? Many of them were from Spain, of course, but some of them had they were born in Mexico. They were born in New Spain. So that is my answer. We have to continue to search for those Indians that went, but that's my answer.
Thank you, Dr. Machuca. Before I read the next question, we acknowledge the presence of Philippine Honorary Consul in Guadalajara, Honorary Consul Martin Camarena. Welcome po. Okay, ¿cuáles son los temas pendientes para la historiografía cultural sobre la relación Filipinas-Nueva España? That's the question. ¿Cuáles son los temas pendientes para la historiografía cultural sobre la relación Filipinas-Nueva España?
Pues voy a contestar en español. Creo que es una persona, bueno, que habla español. This person is asking the topics we need to search more in this relationship between Mexico and the Philippines in the historiography. Y bueno, esa es una de esas, creo, la que dije hace un momento, de qué personajes son importantes en llevar la cultura mesoamericana a Filipinas. Yo en este momento estoy interesada en eso, estoy enfocada en eso. También creo que tenemos que investigar más sobre la forma de apropiación de los elementos de cada lado del Pacífico. O sea, por ejemplo, no solo, así como hice el trabajo de la palma de coco en Colima y cómo se adaptó, transformó, modificó, etcétera, creo que eso se puede también dar, pero en Filipinas, ¿no? De muchas plantas de origen americano. Es decir, ¿quién las llevó, estas plantas, como la papaya, la guayaba, el cacao? ¿Quién enseñó a cultivarlas? Porque, por ejemplo, el cacao es una planta muy delicada, necesita conocimiento. Entonces, ¿quién dio ese conocimiento? ¿De qué manera los filipinos adoptaron esas plantas, verdad? ¿De qué manera las transformaron? ¿Cómo con el tiempo estas plantas se fueron introduciendo incluso en los mitos locales? Porque hay mitos, ¿sabes? Yo sé que hay mitos sobre el origen del maíz en Filipinas. Entonces, el maíz es la planta mesoamericana por excelencia. Es normal que haya mitos aquí, pero yo estoy sorprendida que haya mitos de los orígenes del maíz en Filipinas. Entonces digo, quiere decir que se incorporó, bueno, muy bien, ¿no? Y muy rápido, etcétera. Entonces, bueno, ejemplos más o menos como esos, creo que necesitan ser profundizados, ¿verdad? Para tener un mejor entendimiento. Y otra cosa que a mí me ha gustado desde el principio es trabajar, como dicen en inglés, the history from below. O sea, con gente menuda, no los grandes personajes que tenemos mucha documentación, ¿no? ¿Verdad? Que si el virrey, el gobernador, los alcaldes, etcétera, está bien, digo, yo también practico esa historia y la hago y es muy necesaria, pero también me parece que hay que darle voz a esa migración anónima que transformó paisajes, transformó alimentación, cambió formas culturales locales y son anónimas. Y yo pienso que la historiografía en este momento tiene que mirar hacia esos aspectos, ¿verdad? I don't know if the people in the Philippines can understand this, but I'm trying to say that I like to practice the history from below. That means I like to give voice to many anonymous people, like those immigrants from the Manila Galleon, that maybe we don't know much of them, but if we make an effort, we can arrive to know a little bit more about those lives, which were as important as the lives of the governors and mayors and viceroys, you know. This is my particular posture, and that's what I like to practice it.
Muchas
Thank
gracias,
you.
doctora.
Sí.
For our next question, okay, JM, since JM, yeah, you can give your question.
Hola a todos, hola a todos. Buenos días a todos. Tengo una pregunta para señora Machuca. Me llamo Juan Miguel. Soy estudiante de Historia, so I'm just gonna speak English at this point because my Spanish has limits.
No, it's really good, Jose Miguel. Go ahead.
So, señora Machuca, my question is, I am very fascinated about your research, about your paper, about how baybayin arrived in Mexico, because the development of baybayin is one of my research interests. No?
Okay.
And contrary to popular belief, the Spaniards didn't actually destroy the baybayin manuscripts here in the Philippines, just like what the previous scholars have said. And they actually preserved it in order to learn the languages of the native Filipinos here for the purpose of converting them to Christianity.
Yes.
So I just want I just want a bit more elaboration about how and why baybayin arrived in Mexico. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Jose Miguel. And your Spanish is really good. I encourage you to continue practicing it. So this is a fascinating history of the Baybayin in the Colima archives. You know, when I was making research on this, I contacted Christopher Miller. He's Canadian, or he lives in Canada, and Jean-Paul Potet, he's French. They are the two major, or one of the two major, how can I say, and prestigious people that know about Baybayin or who have worked a lot with Baybayin scripture in the Philippines and in other parts of the world. So they told me that they were amazed that I found those signatures in Mexico, in Colima. So they didn't have any notice of the importance of the Filipino there. So they encouraged me to continue with the research and the publication. And in the acknowledgement, the names of Jean-Paul Potet, Christopher Miller are there. So this is a really interesting question. How did Baybayin arrive in Mexico, and why did these Filipinos wrote actually Baybayin? So we are used to think that the Filipinos that arrived in the Manila Galleon didn't know how to write or didn't know how to read, or they were people, how can I say, very from below or so on. So this research and these Baybayin signatures tells us that Filipinos from many profiles came here. And Filipinos from the Principalia, you know, when I say Principalia, I think that you understand what I'm referring to. The Principalia, you know, Mexico or the Philippines were those people from noble families of the indigenous communities that they had some privileges given by the Spaniards. So people from the Principalia came to Mexico. That is really important. So that tells us about that many profiles, commerciants, Principalia, or people that just work in the galleon, etc., arrived here. Because when we say Indios, Chinos, Filipinos, we tend to homogenize. And no, really far from that. So we have to start, maybe that's another thing that we need to do more research, to see the profiles of many of those Filipinos. So for the Baybayin, we have a member of the Principalia in the Philippines that knew how to write, to sign his name. Another person that came, we don't know much more about him, but he knew how to write his name, and also he served as an interpreter for other Filipino who actually he interpreted and wrote also his name. Unfortunately, with in the archives, not many questions were posed to those people, because sometimes, you know, when we have some queries, the Spanish ask you, where are you from? Why are you in the Philippines? Why are you in Mexico and not in the Philippines? How did you arrive here? But those questions are not there. So that's a shame. That's a shame, because we don't know much about those people. Then we know another Filipino that wrote his name in Baybayin, and he was from the southern part of Luzon. He was married, and the Spaniards told him, okay, if you're married, you have to go to the Philippines and go to your wife, because you cannot be here. So in the next galleon, you have to go there. You know, it's like Jose Miguel, it's like a puzzle. It's like a puzzle that we cannot have the biography or the entire biography, but we can have this portrait of the richness of the profile of the Filipinos. I would like to translate that paper into English. I will see if I can do it, because you might be interested in the Philippines for that. It's a 30-page article in which I try to give the information about that. So that's it, Jose Miguel.
Thank you, Doctora. Before we proceed to the next question, we acknowledge the presence of Licenciado Ramon Sierra Lopez from Acapulco, a historian and also an expert on Philippine-Mexico relations. Okay, Cian Flores, you can.
Good morning/evening, Doctora. I am Sean Heinrich I. Flores from UP Diliman. And although this is out of scope in your presentation, I'm curious about this. How did the Philippines and Mexico react to each other's quests for independence? Muchas gracias for the answer.
Okay, thank you, Sean. I'm not pretty sure if I understood your question. How did they react from independent process?
Yes, that's the question.
Okay, in Mexico, we have the independence war, or Guerra de Independencia, that we call here. And that's the reason why in 1815, the galleon did not continue to the Philippines because of the war in Mexico. The Philippines was not isolated. The Philippines was not isolated because there was this route that Spain had from Cadiz, you know. So by then, by the beginning of the 19th century, the Philippines had communication with the New Spain, but also with Spain. So Spain didn't need any more, quotes, from Mexico to maintain a relationship with the Philippines. So I know that there are some works that have discussed why did the Philippines did not get its independence. We know that there were some reactions there, but not as in Mexico. And you know, in Mexico, there were some people that when they got the independence from Mexico in 1821, that is the year that the independence of Mexico was 1821. And after 1821, some voices from Mexico said, hey, the Philippines belongs to us, not to Spain, because we have maintained a relationship, a close relationship with them for 200 years and a half. Those voices did not prosper, you know. And, you know, even if there were some reactions in the Philippines, they were not strong enough, like to get its independence from Spain. But this is true. This is true that all the American movement, you know, Mexico, Central America, South America, you know, all this process of independence, the Philippines was not aware of that because the galleon did not continue. So the galleon was a way also of, was a means of communication. So if you don't have that means of communication, you don't really but realize what is happening day by day or month by month there. So that is why the Philippines did not really follow in real time, quotes, because we are talking about the 19th century, but did not follow what was happening in South America. Or I don't say that they didn't realize, because of course they had information, but not enough as if the galleon continued. So I think that if the galleon had continued, maybe other things should have happened. But I'm pretty sure that there are some works that discuss why the Philippines didn't get its independence and why Mexico did, you know. Thank you, Sean.
Due to time constraints.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Due to time constraints, we can no longer accommodate questions, but we would like to thank Doctora Paulina Machuca as our inaugural speaker. We are really fortunate. No? We are lucky to have you here now. So thank you so much. Can we invite everyone to turn on their camera and let's have a photo op to commemorate this important event of Historia Olvidada, Filipinas-México. Okay, somebody will take the photo, no?
Yes, po, Dr. Kristen. Okay. I will cue in everyone. Please turn on your cameras. And flash your best smile. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's go for the second page. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you very much.
Okay, to give her closing remarks, we invite Vice Consul Marisa Winkler.
Thank you, Dr. Christine. On behalf of the Philippine Embassy in Mexico, first, I would like to express my gratitude to our inaugural speaker, Dr. Paulina Machuca. Personally, I learned so many information about the Philippine-Mexico relations tonight. And of course, I would like to thank our co-organizers, Dr. Tomas Calvillo of the El Colegio de San Luis and University of the Philippines and the Philippine Studies Program based at UNAM. Thank you so much for this initiative. Actually, this is really an initiative of Dr. Tomas Calvillo and Dr. Cristel Obispado, because they really believe that the history between Philippines and Mexico has been forgotten. So that's why it's called La Historia Olvidada, the forgotten history. So as you know, this year we're celebrating the 70th anniversary of Philippine-Mexico relations. But the truth, our history really started 458 years ago during the beginning of the galleon trade. But we only know so little about the Philippine-Mexico relations. So because of this initiative, we hope that our participants, the people from both countries, Philippines and Mexico, will know more about this. And we hope that eventually through this lectures, our cultural exchanges, people-to-people exchanges, trade, tourism will increase. So we have this event every third Tuesday of the month. So we hope our participants will continue to attend and invite more friends. And also under the Philippine Studies Program, we also have lectures, and under the Philippine Embassy, we also have lectures. So I hope that you will continue to support our events. Thank you very much to all our participants, and have a good day. Have a good night in the Philippines. Have a good night in Mexico and wherever you are. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paulina.
Thank you.
Gracias, buenas noches.
Gracias.
Buenas noches. Thank you, Dr. Cristil, Dr. Tomas Calvillo, Dr. Ivan, Licenciado Ramon, thank you for coming. Thank you. Congratulations.
Congrats.
Thank you, Dr. Cristil.